Paris, France, 18th arrondissement. Date, July 16th, 1942. The Vel d'Yves roundup, Rafle du Vélodrome d'Hiver. I heard the knock just before dawn. 3 hard raps, not frantic, not polite, deliberate. Mama froze where she stood, her hand halfway to the cupboard. My younger brother, Ely, curled tighter into my side. Papa whispered one word. Chut. Then everything went still. The ticking clock, the rain tapping at the shutters, even the air in our lungs. We had been waiting for this. They'd taken others already. The Markoviches from down the hall, the Seligman twins. Whispers filled the stairwell at night. Names of the missing, rumors of relocation, stories passed in terrified fragments. But now it was our door. More knocking. Then boots on the landing. Heavy. Measured. I counted them. 3, maybe 4. Papa crossed the room, slow and steady, as if each step could change our fate. He placed a finger to his lips, then slid the hidden panel in the floor open. We had practiced this. Ellie and I slipped inside. Mama followed, clutching her coat tight around her. We lay in the crawl space beneath the floorboards, barely tall enough to kneel, surrounded by jars of canned fruit and the faint smell of mildew. Then the door crashed open. French voices, not German, but the fear didn't ease. We knew who they worked for now. The Police Nationale, the ones with lists. I heard them moving through the flat, papers rustling, drawers opening, our chairs scraping across tile. One of them spoke harshly, asking for names, for papers. Then, after a long silence, footsteps approached the rug above us. Someone stood directly over our heads. We didn't move. Not when dust fell from the cracks. Not when Ely began to tremble so hard I thought they would hear the boards rattle. Not even when Mama whispered, "Pretend you can't hear." So soft I felt it more than heard it. And that was it. That was the rule. We would survive by not hearing, not speaking, not reacting. If they opened the hatch, we were dead. But if they believed we were deaf, mute, non-existent, we might live. Minutes passed, then an hour. Finally, the boots faded. The door slammed. Only then did I realize I'd been clutching Mama's wrist so hard her skin had turned white. We didn't cry. We didn't speak. We listened. To nothing. Because silence, we had learned, could be louder than prayer. Paris, France, 18th arrondissement. Time, 1930s, before 1940. Before the war, we were just the Silbermanns from Rue Custine. Papa owned a small repair shop. Radios, clocks, even sewing machines. He had nimble fingers and the patience of a monk. Mama worked at home, stitching lace into linens for Catholic women in the 9th arrondissement. Her hands were never still, not even during dinner. We were not wealthy. We were not poor. We were simply there. Another quiet Jewish family living under the soft gray sky of Paris. I was born in 1929. My name is Sarah. I liked warm milk with cinnamon and I hated math. I loved the corner patisserie, especially when Monsieur Baptiste let me watch him sprinkle sugar over brioche. I had one pair of black shoes, which I polished every Sunday whether I wore them or not. Ellie came 4 years after me. He had curls so tight Mama used to say he stored secrets in them. He followed me everywhere. Even when I read, he'd sit beside me and ask questions I couldn't answer, like, why does God need so many stars? Or, if we're French, why don't we eat pork like the others? That one made Papa laugh. Because we're French and Jewish, he said. That's like having 2 maps in your pocket. Paris in the late 1930s was full of maps. Maps of politics, Borders, identities, and lines you didn't see until you crossed them. We didn't feel them at first. Our apartment was across the street from a Catholic convent. I could hear the girls there singing hymns in the afternoon. Sometimes when the nuns weren't looking, I'd sing along through the window just to feel included. One girl even waved at me once. We weren't hidden. I wore my Star of David necklace openly. Papa hung a mezuzah by the door. We attended synagogue on Rue des Rosiers when we could. I remember the smell of old prayer books and waxy candles, the sound of voices layered like linen over stone. But things began to shift slowly, subtly. It started with jokes in the schoolyard. "Jew face," some boys would whisper. One called me Filthy Sarah and shoved my books into the gutter. I told Papa. He sighed but didn't react. "Keep your head down," he said. "This passes." It always does, but it didn't. By 1938, people had stopped looking at us the same. Neighbors who once asked about Mama's embroidery now crossed the street. Papa said little, but he worked longer hours. We listened to the radio in secret, ears pressed close to the wood as Germany's voice grew louder and nearer. And then, in 1940, everything snapped. German troops marched through Paris like they were home. The tricolor flags were torn down. Signs changed. Orders were issued. Jews were registered. Our papers were stamped with a red J. We became something else. Not neighbors, not citizens, just names on a list. We had not changed. But the world around us had. And Ely, only 7 then, began to ask quieter questions. Like, why do we need hiding places? And why don't we say our names out loud anymore? I told him we were playing a game. But it wasn't a game. It was the start of pretending. Paris, France time, May 1940, July 1942. German occupation, anti-Jewish measures, Vel d'Echèvre roundup. The day the Germans marched into Paris, the bells didn't ring. We listened from our window. June 14th, 1940, as tanks rolled down the boulevard and boots struck the pavement with mechanical precision. Ellie sat beside me, silent, eyes wide. Mama pulled the curtains shut. From that moment on, we became watchers, listeners. We heard more than we said, saw more than we admitted. At first, life didn't change completely. Not overnight. Shops stayed open, buses ran. People still bought bread and waited for the rain to pass beneath awnings. But the fear settled like dust in our lungs. Quiet, steady, inescapable. Within weeks, new laws appeared. Jewish-owned businesses had to register, then display signs in their windows. Papa's repair shop was forced to hang a yellow placard. Entreprise Juive. Clients stopped coming. Even Baptiste from the patisserie began avoiding our side of the street. Mama's work dried up. One of her longtime clients left a basket of embroidery on our doorstep, unpaid, and never came back. Then came the registration cards. My school-issued ID was replaced with one marked with a red J. I was 13. Next, the curfews. No Jews outside after 8 p.m. Then, no cinemas. No parks, no cafes, no market days, no bicycles, no radios. In August 1941, Papa was briefly arrested and taken to a holding camp at Drancy. They let him out after 2 weeks. Something about the wrong paperwork. But he returned thinner, quieter. He stopped shaving. And for the first time, he said something I'd never heard before. "We may need to leave Paris." But there was nowhere to go. The borders were closed. The Vichy government collaborated with the occupiers. The gendarmes, the French police, had begun compiling names, addresses, lists. By spring of 1942, the synagogue was shuttered. And then came the stars. May 29th, 1942. The German military command announced all Jews over 6 years old must wear a yellow badge, stitched with Juif in bold black letters. Mama wept silently as she sewed them onto our coats. Elie stared at his like it was poison. He didn't want to wear it to the boulangerie. So I stitched another badge, plain brown fabric, and I told him it was a game, that we were in disguise. He smiled for the first time in weeks, but nothing we did could hide what was coming. On July 16th, 1942, it began. At 4:30 a.m., sirens wailed. Not the kind that warned of bombers, but a different kind. The kind that meant doors opening, boots climbing stairs, names being read off lists. We heard them, all over the 18th arrondissement. Trucks, shouting, crying, keys rattling. By noon, over 13,000 Jews were arrested. Men, women, children. Over 4,000 were children. The French police dragged them from their homes and herded them into the Velodrome d'Hiver, an indoor bicycle stadium just 2 kilometers from the Eiffel Tower. The windows were sealed. No toilets, no food, no water. Families sat on concrete floors in the stench of sweat, urine, and fear. We weren't taken. Not that day. Because we had practiced. Because we had hidden. Because Papa had bribed the concierge to tell anyone who asked that the Silbermanns were gone. But we weren't gone. We were beneath the floorboards. We were in the attic of a Catholic school in a priest's cellar, in the abandoned nursery of a kind neighbor who said nothing and asked nothing. We moved 4 times in 2 months, each place tighter, darker, stranger. And each time we were told, don't speak, don't look, don't answer. If they come, Papa said, we are deaf. We are mute. We are nothing. By August, Elie didn't talk at all. He held my hand at night, and if a board creaked, he would press his fingers to his lips, miming what Mama had said 1,000 times. Pretend. Paris, France, hiding across the 5th and 14th arrondissements. Time, August 1942, March 1944. There are 2 kinds of darkness. The kind that comes when the sun sets, and the kind that never lifts, no matter how bright the lamps burn. We lived in the second kind. After the roundup in July, we disappeared. Our family, 3 people with names, voices, memories, became shadows passed between walls. We moved constantly, never more than a few weeks in one place. Sometimes a night, sometimes a few hours. First, the attic of the school near Rue Mouffetard. A priest there, Father Lucien, let us hide behind the organ loft. He said very little. He gave us soup and bread and made the sign of the cross whenever he left the room. We slept on hymnals wrapped in blankets that smelled like incense and dust. Then, a basement under Madame Charpentier's bookshop. She had been one of Mama's clients once. Now she let us stay in the coal cellar behind her stacks of banned books. She told the neighbors the banging pipes were from rats. We didn't speak unless it was absolutely necessary. And even then, we mouthed the words. Elie stopped asking questions. His mouth became a straight line. He carried a notebook where he wrote everything down. What we ate, what he saw, what he remembered from the world before. Once, I peeked. He had drawn Mama's hands sewing stars. Winter came early that year. 1942 froze the city. I remember trying to light a candle in the cellar and my fingers wouldn't bend. The wax cracked before it melted. Papa tried to heat water in a tin cup using a strip of cloth soaked in alcohol. It barely warmed. The cold wasn't just on our skin. It lived inside us, in our teeth, in our ribs, in the way we shivered even when there was no breeze. We had no heat, no radio, no books. We listened through floorboards for footsteps. That's how we measured time, by other people's movements. A broom, a boot, a knock. Every sound was a message, every silence a threat. Once, a German soldier entered the bookshop while we were in the cellar. He came for cigarettes. Madame Charpentier told him she had none. He lingered, asked about the smell. Dust, she said, laughing. I have too many books and no time to clean. We didn't breathe for 20 minutes. When he finally left, Mama collapsed onto the floor. Her legs wouldn't hold her. She wept. Silently, of course. Food was harder to find than shelter. Ration cards didn't exist for us anymore. We relied on scraps from friends, nuns, strangers who had nothing but gave something anyway. Once we ate nothing but boiled onions for 4 days. Another time, I stole a potato from a market stall. I didn't even realize I had done it until it was in my coat pocket, and we were 3 blocks away. I cried the whole way back. That night, we split the potato 4 ways, even though we were only 3. By early 1944, Paris was worn thin. So were we. Our world was a cracked room with mold on the ceiling and fear in the walls. We had forgotten what fresh air tasted like, what light felt like on skin, what laughter sounded like when it wasn't nervous or forced. Illy still didn't speak, but he would hum sometimes, just a few notes, low and soft. Mama said it was a miracle. I thought it was memory. Even the voice inside him wanted to be remembered. We survived on silence. And silence, no matter how strong, wears thin. Paris, France, 14th arrondissement, near Montparnasse time. April, August, 1944. French resistance activity and Allied advance. April brought more footsteps. Different ones. We heard them at night. Quicker, lighter. Then whispers. Then muffled shouting. One morning, a young man with ink-stained fingers knocked on the trapdoor beneath the bakery where we were hiding. He didn't ask who we were. He just said, "It's coming. Be ready." He was with the resistance. That spring, the city started breathing again. Just barely. German patrols thinned. Flyers appeared under doorways. Whispers filled cafes. Of Allied landings, of radios hidden in wine crates, of sabotage near train lines. Madame Charpentier smuggled messages in old books. Father Lucien disappeared and came back with bruised hands and torn robes. But survival became more dangerous, not less. More arrests, more executions. The Gestapo cracked down harder, and the milice, French collaborators, were the worst. They didn't wear foreign uniforms. They wore the same boots as everyone else. They smiled as they asked for your name. On May 3rd, they came for the Dreyfus family 3 buildings down from us. I watched from behind the shutters as they dragged out the daughter, Claire. She was 15. I had known her before the stars. We once braided each other's hair during a Sabbath picnic in the park. She looked up, saw me, and didn't blink. She knew I was still there. She didn't say a word. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it. Her face, her silence, the scream her mother made as the door closed behind the officers. Papa sat at the foot of my cot, wrapping gauze around a wound on his wrist. He'd slipped while reinforcing the hatch with nails. His hands trembled. "I can't do this again," he whispered. Mama tried to hush him, but he shook his head. "I won't let them take us piece by piece. I won't let them take you." That was the night he gave me a choice. "If they come again," he said, "you run. Don't argue. Don't look back." I didn't want to listen, but deep down, I knew the truth. He had already made peace with what he might have to do. June came. The Allies landed in Normandy. Everyone knew. You could feel it in the air, humming under the city like a second pulse. Then, in early July, it happened. A knock. Not at our hatch, but at the front door upstairs. Loud. Sharp. We'd been betrayed. Someone talked. We scrambled. Mama grabbed Illy. I reached for Papa's hand. He didn't move. He shoved the floorboard shut over us, hard, fast. I heard him say, "Go." Now. Then darkness. We escaped through the crawlspace tunnel Madame had dug behind the wall. Into the alley, into rain, into a city that didn't know us anymore. We never saw Papa again. Later, we heard rumors that the milice had raided a hidden room, that one man had resisted, that he'd been taken to Fresnes prison. No trial, no list, just disappeared. We spent the rest of that summer in silence, hiding, waiting. On August 19th, the uprising began. Paris rose. By August 25th, the Germans surrendered the city. The war wasn't over, but the occupation was. People cheered in the streets, they waved flags, they kissed strangers. We didn't. We sat on a wooden bench near the Seine, hands clasped, watching others celebrate. I kept turning toward every man in a brown coat, every tall silhouette in the smoke. But none of them were Papa. He had stayed to save us. And now, I was the only one who could remember the sound of his voice. Paris, France, post-liberation years. Time, 1945, early 1950s. After the liberation, no one knew what to do with the survivors. There were no ceremonies for the ones who lived behind walls, no parades for those who pretended not to exist. The war was over, but what came after didn't feel like peace. The papers called us the returned, but we hadn't gone anywhere. We had simply disappeared in place. In 1945, Mama and Ellie and I moved back into the apartment on Rue Custine. The windows had been shattered, the furniture looted. The mezuzah by the door had been pried off, leaving a rust-stained scar in the brick. Mama scrubbed the walls until her fingers bled. I washed every floorboard with vinegar and boiling water. Ailey wouldn't go near the cellar. He didn't speak for months. When he finally did, his voice cracked like he was remembering how to use it. He was 11 now. He slept with a knife under his pillow and woke screaming at sounds that weren't there. I went back to school, though I was far older than the girls in my class. They talked about fashion and new films and American chocolate. I sat at the back and drew faces I couldn't remember anymore. Sometimes I felt angry that the world kept turning. Other times I felt guilty for feeling anything at all. In 1947, I started working at a bookstore. Madame Charpentier's place, the one with the coal cellar where we'd once hidden. She had aged 10 years. She never spoke of what she'd done for us. She just handed me the keys and said, "You'll know where everything is." I did. I found Eli a teacher who helped him speak again, a doctor who didn't ask questions. Mama joined a widow's circle at the synagogue. They lit candles each week for the ones who never returned. Papa's name was one of them. No grave, no official record. Just a name, said aloud. Every week I wrote it down again in my journal. David Silbermann, father, watchmaker. Disappeared July 1944. Sometimes I imagined he was still alive, walking in another city, using a false name. But deep down I knew. I had known the moment he shut the hatch. I couldn't forget the sound of the floorboard closing. The war stayed with me in small ways, in the way I flinched at sirens, in how I memorized every exit in a room, in how I hesitated before speaking, always checking if it was safe to be heard. I loved books, but I couldn't read war stories. I loved music, but I couldn't listen to violins. Once, in 1950, a man from the ministry asked if I wanted to give a testimony. I said no. I wasn't ready. But I wrote. Letters I never sent. Stories I never shared. Memories I folded into pages and tucked away in books at the shop. I thought maybe one day someone would find them. And maybe then they would understand. We didn't fight in trenches. We didn't wear uniforms. But we survived. And that survival had a cost. Paris, France time. Late 1960s, early 1970s. I'm telling you this because I need you to know that survival isn't silence. For years, I believed that forgetting was the same as healing. That if we didn't speak of the cellar, of the badges, of the boots on the stairs, maybe it would fade. Maybe the war would let us go. It didn't. It stayed. In the way Ellie checks locks twice each night. In the way Mama still folds her clothes as if someone might inspect them. In the way I stop breathing when I hear footsteps behind me, even now, decades later. And I realized, if I don't tell this, someone else will erase it. Someone who wasn't there. Who didn't hold their breath in the floorboards while French police walked above them. Who didn't listen to their father say, "Run." Who didn't pretend to be deaf just to stay alive. The story isn't about heroes. It isn't about glory. It's about the quiet kind of resistance. The kind where you choose not to vanish. Where you choose to hold on to your brother's hand instead of hope. Where you choose to become invisible. Not because you are ashamed, but because you are hunted. I still walk past the WWII site sometimes. There's a plaque there now. Words carved into stone. But that's not where I remember the war. I remember it in the scratch of a pencil in the dark. In the weight of a stolen potato. In the sound of my name whispered like a prayer under the floor. My name is Sarah Silbermann, and I was not supposed to survive. But I did. And if you've read this far, so has part of my voice. Don't forget it.